I'm going to have to guess. In any event, let's begin today. Let's begin today by mentioning that we're starting a new book of the Bible, the book of Exodus, and we call Shemot. And the question is, what does the word Shemot or Shemos have to do with the story of the Exodus from Egypt? So it's important to realize that our rabbis remind us that Judaism survived because our ancestors kept their Jewish names. The name Shemot means names, and that led to the Exodus because they were proud to remain Jewish despite the difficulties of the time. And Shemos, it describes who they are. Now, this is an important concept because today we find many people have no idea of what their Jewish name is. But our Jewish name happens to be a spiritual component of who we are. The rabbis tell us when you're given your Jewish name, whether it's Hebrew or Yiddish, that name was chosen by heaven. It's the best name for you to have. And it describes the challenges you'll face in life and the accomplishments. So the Jewish people remained loyal because they kept their Jewish names. And one of the commentators mentions that the great leader of the Jewish people, Joseph, who was the viceroy of Egypt, he is saying to us that he had a non-Jewish name named Sofnat Paneach, but that name was not the name he chose. It was given to him by Pharaoh, but he himself remained Joseph or Yosef his whole life, and that is very important. So today, people will sometimes call me and ask me to say a prayer for them, and I ask them, what is your Jewish name? And sometimes they even had bar or bat mitzvahs they still don't remember, because it wasn't cool, I guess, to use the Jewish name even during bar mitzvah training or bat mitzvah training, and so they really aren't sure. And that's unfortunate because it's very important to find out what our name is. Remember, your name means something of significance. It tells you quite a bit about what you are or who you're supposed to be. And as you know, every name in the Bible means something that's very, very special and very spiritual. If your name is Israel, for instance, it refers to the one who struggled with God, with angels and with man, and prevailed. If your name is Sarah, it means someone who became a spiritual princess. These names are very important. So that's how we begin the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot. And I just like to just share with one more idea about this with you, and that is that at the end of the last portion, the Torah repeats itself, which is unusual. It says that Joseph lived to be 110 years old. Okay, and it says it twice. And the question is, why would that be mentioned twice? What is the significance? So again, it always pays to look at the wording. The first time it says that he lived to be 110, it said he lived to be 110 years old. And then it says he died at 110. And the point would be that just as he lived his life fully, and his whole life he was alive and made the best of every situation, so too, even in his death, he left a very important inheritance for his descendants. And that's referred to when he brings up his great-grandchildren. They're raised on his knees, and he is able to impart his spirituality to his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And therefore, we're not surprised when the most famous group of women in the Bible appears, known as the daughters of Tzlafchad, the women who wanted to inherit land in the land of Israel. They are they are actually his descendants. They're brilliant. They're very spiritual. They are the descendants of Joseph, and in the same way, Joshua, the next leader after Moses, will be again a direct descendant of Joshua, and their lives will parallel quite a bit. And that's what happens when you read the Bible very carefully. You'll see parallels between fathers and children and grandchildren, great grandchildren. It's all there for us to know. So, having said that, let's get back to our study. Okay, as you know, we've read passages from Ecclesiastes, from Kohelet, and we're reading passages right now from Proverbs, and we'll see that sometimes the passages seem to contradict themselves. So let's see if there isn't something that we can learn even when there's a contradiction. You'll see it really isn't so. Okay, let's look at the top of the page of Proverbs. This is chapter 13, verse 7. And it says as follows: some pretend to be rich and have nothing, but others act poor and have great wealth. Wow, that seems very, very significant to me because it has many levels of understanding. But the simple meaning is there are people who have very little, but they want to leave a very nice impression on society, so they live way beyond their means. And this is a very sad thing. They don't have anything, and yet they want to look like millionaires. And in the process, they suffer terribly because they're not living for reality. They're living for show, to impress their neighbors. On the other hand, there are others who act poor and have great wealth. And these people are really wealthier than you would imagine. They're just not showing off their wealth. They act like they're average people. They have great wealth. And that is to their credit, that they're interested in not in making nice impressions as much as having great achievements. They use their great wealth to further the spirituality of the Jewish people and themselves. And there's a great rabbi who lived in the 16th century called the Kli Yakar, and he makes a reference in this regard. He says that what the majority of the Jewish people are doing today is a very big mistake. And that big mistake is they're building beautiful, beautiful homes to impress their neighbors, not realizing that sometimes by building these homes, you can create feelings of anti-Semitism or feelings of jealousy among your neighbors. And he feels that this is something that Jewish people, or the majority, don't seem to remember or don't want to remember it. We like to just enjoy the moment, but sometimes that creates big problems. So the point is that we have to learn to be humble in the way we do things. And being humble does not mean that we don't achieve great things, but humility is one of the great qualities. And the people who act poor are usually people who are humble, but their great wealth is what they're able to do for us. Okay. Now, the next sentence, number 8, says, a man's wealth may redeem his soul. And that means that when a person has great wealth, it can save their soul. It'll help their soul because they're very charitable. Tzedakah is one of the great mitzvahs of the Torah. If we were looking at chapter 10 of Proverbs, we would see that King Solomon says that tzedakah tatzil mimavet, giving charity will save one from death. What a powerful thing. But what that really is to be taken in a very strict application. We often say when we give tzedakah, we say we're giving chai. Why is the word chai used? It refers to the number 18, but the word chai also means life. Giving tzedakah promotes life. That's what King Solomon is saying in chapter 10 of Proverbs. We're not looking at it right now, but the point is that tzedakah is a major, major thing. And we see this idea actually mentioned throughout the book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Torah. We'll talk about people who give tithing, maaser or tithes, that God rewards them in a very special way, that they never lose any money with the tithing they do. Now, what is tithing? You might be wondering. Now, non-Jewish people believe if they give tithes to the church, that is the commandment, that's the mitzvah, but that's not what Judaism teaches. Judaism wants us to give 1/10, at least 1/10 of our income to the poor. The poor are the ones who need help, and we should help them by being very charitable. It does promote life, and we're told in different parts of the Talmud that no one ever lost money because they were very charitable. So this is just a point to remember. A man's wealth may redeem his soul. That's very good. But in verse 8, it continues, but only if the poor hear no chastisement. Now, what does that mean? Well, King Solomon is telling us that when we give to the poor, sometimes we do it in a very unfortunate way. Sometimes we embarrass people when we're very charitable to them. We make a statement out loud in front of people, and we talk about, we're so proud of the money we gave to so and so, because they were in dire needs. Well, if they're present and they hear you say that, they are going to be very embarrassed, very humiliated, and that good deed that you thought you were doing really becomes a big sin, because you've humiliated somebody by referring to your generosity. This is something we don't want you to do, and that's what he means. That if this is only good if the poor hear no chastisement, if they're not embarrassed in the process of your being very generous. Okay, and it's interesting to note that giving charity is one of the great mitzvahs of the Torah. However, and I would tell you that even if you speak to Rabbi Green, who's a great scholar, and ask him, what blessing do you make when you give charity? I'm hoping he's going to say you don't make a blessing, because I also feel you don't do it. And one of the good reasons for not making a blessing is if you're giving somebody a handout, and before you give them the handout, you make a blessing, it could be very humiliating that you are giving money to somebody and making a blessing to their discomfort. So in that case, don't be very careful how you give out your charity, because if you do it incorrectly, you commit a much greater sin than a mitzvah. Okay. All right, Rabbi Green, you'll talk to me after the class and tell me if I was correct. Let's go to the next verse, and that is number 9. The light of the righteous will rejoice, but the lamp of the wicked will flicker out. Now, what that means is, and of course it means many, many things, but what it means is when people live a righteous life, the light that they create with their good deeds will continue to live on and on. And as I said, like Joseph, even though he died at 110, his impact was so strong that the next generation, the next 4 generations later, his descendants were living in great spiritual piety. And that's because the light of the righteous will rejoice. The light will continue to remain. But the lamp of the wicked will flicker out, meaning that the people who live unethical, immoral lives, whatever they think is going to last will not last. They will be forgotten very quickly or remembered in a very negative way. Okay, many of the greatest villains in history, thought they would be remembered forever. Uh, People like Stalin, who really thought he was changing the world with communism and all that. In the end, we remember him as a man who was guilty of killing probably at least 20 million of his own subjects. Uh, just an evil man. There are many others. So the people who want to be remembered, who are evil, they're remembered, but as part of being evil, not in any good way. Okay. Our next verse is number 10, which says, only by willfulness is strife fomented. Okay, meaning that when people are fighting and arguing, it's usually done because people really want to make a point. They're trying to prove that what they're doing is the correct thing to do, and their actions really go in the other direction. They are acting in a very inappropriate way. But wisdom is with those who take counsel. Meaning, if you want to know what you should do in any situation, you really should have somebody that you speak to, usually a good rabbi or a good friend who you respect. These people can show you what the better choice would be. I'm reminded of a beautiful passage mentioned by the famous Kohelet in his book on Jewish law, dealing with the laws of reading from the Torah. And he says that it's very easy for something to go wrong right as we're beginning the Torah service, which would be a terrible thing because the Torah is our most treasured possession, and to be disrespectful in front of a Torah is truly a sign of complete spiritual lacking. Anyway, here's what he says. He says, what can happen as we're beginning a Torah service, whether it's Monday, Thursday, or it could even be on a Shabbat. What happens is somebody, of course, is disturbing everybody or disturbing you, and they're talking or laughing or joking. And you think, well, you're going to remind them that they shouldn't be doing that. So what you do is you tell them in your best Yiddish, you say, Shah. And you're happy that you stopped the evil before it got out of hand. But surprisingly, the person that you told to be quiet is not pleased that you told him or her to be quiet. And they respond by telling you to be quiet. Well, you're shocked. You were trying to do a good thing, and somebody's insulting you by telling you to keep quiet when you haven't been talking. So you remind them to keep quiet, and so forth and so on. And it really can lead to a terrible misbehavior during religious services. Has this ever happened? I'm afraid it has. And it's happened not only in America, it's happened in Europe very, very often. And the point that the Chofetz Chaim is trying to make is that the person who starts off by telling somebody to be quiet is the one making the big mistake. If people are noisy, you should not be the one to say, stop making noise, because they will take that in the other direction. Who are you to tell me to be quiet? And yes, they will. It gets out of hand, and it's like a conflagration. It's a terrible thing. And that's why in our Torah service, we have right before we begin the Torah service, we ask God to save us from those difficult times, Misha'ot Hara'ot. And those difficult times are the times when people have to tell each other to keep quiet. And that ends up being a travesty because each person is insulted and back and forth and back and forth. And nobody seems to care about what's going on in the Torah reading. Everybody is interested in taking sides with those who make noise versus those who want peace and quiet, who are also making noise. So you got to be careful. You have to use wisdom. Wisdom means you have to sort of ask people what to do before the situation gets out of hand. Okay, let's take a look at our next verse, which is number 11. Wealth gained by vanity will diminish. Okay, meaning when a person becomes wealthy or makes money in a negative way with vanity, they're showing off, that isn't going to really do much, because when people are showing off, they don't use their money properly for good purposes. So that money will diminish because it's not being used in a proper way. Nevertheless, but money that gathered by hand will increase, meaning that when a person slowly makes money and they save money for a good purpose, even though it doesn't seem it's a lot of money, but that will keep adding up, and that will be a very, very important achievement for the people involved. Okay, so we have to remember that our attitude makes a very big difference in what we're doing. In fact, the Talmud says, if somebody comes to your door and asks for money, and you don't have any money to give them, and they say, well, can you give me food? And you don't have any food either. Your condition isn't good. There is something you can do, which is very wonderful. You can still cheer them up. And if you cheer them up, you do more good than just giving somebody money or food with a negative look in your face. That is not showing respect for your fellow. And therefore, the best thing you can do at least is always cheer someone up. And if you're giving them charity and directly, then you should also let them know that you respect them as people. You're not just looking down on them as people who don't achieve much in life. You must really be very respectful when you do the mitzvah. Otherwise, sometimes you do the mitzvah that you do becomes an anti-mitzvah, and you really don't want to do that. On a similar level, we have this concept in Proverbs, not in this chapter, where a person knows a certain food is forbidden, and but they feel that they really enjoy it. So what they're going to do is they're going to say a blessing over the food, and knowing that our religion prohibits eating such a food. So a person may feel, since he's thanking God for the food, that his blessing is at least achieving something. So King Solomon reminds us, and no one disagrees, when you make a bracha over something that is forbidden, that bracha, that blessing, is taking God's name in vain. Again, these are beautiful concepts that we see with King Solomon. Let's take a look at number 12. A drawn out hope brings sickness of heart, but desire attained is a tree of life. Okay, so number 12 says the first part is when a person is hoping for something good to happen in their life, and they're hoping and hoping and hoping, and it goes on for a long, long time, and it doesn't work. That just leads to a very big disappointment, and a sickness of heart means that they're very upset inside. They really lack joy in their life, and that's because they're hoping for something, and it goes on and on and on and on for years and years, and when their desire is not achieved, then they become very sick of heart, very disappointed, very maybe beyond that. They may become disenchanted with life, depressed, etc. So I'm going to tell you now something that will cheer you up. Okay, if you haven't been cheered up recently, this is going to be exactly what you want. There's a story of a very righteous man living in America, and he probably lives in Brooklyn, because where else would a righteous man live? Brooklyn, USA. And every day he's praying. He's praying that he'll win the lottery. Every day, every prayer is, please, God, let me win the lottery. Why would you care if I'm rich? Let me be rich. And this goes on for day after day, year after year, every prayer. And finally, his moment of truth arrives. And in his dream, he hears the Almighty speaking to him and says, why don't you buy the lottery ticket first? Then we can discuss how rich you're going to become. So, the point, I hope you think that it's as funny as I do. The point out is that, of course, he's going to be disappointed, because how would he ever make any money if he never bought the lottery ticket? Not that I encourage you to do that, but the point is that we can sometimes hope for something and hope and hope and hope, and it may be very heartbreaking. But desire attained is a tree of life, meaning when something that you want is achieved, it's like eating from the tree of life where you feel you'll live forever. Now, what is the difference between the first part of the verse and the second? And that is as follows. If you're hoping for something that's really way beyond, a normal person's hope, then you're going to hope and hope and hope, and it may never happen. For instance, if you want to win the lottery, this may never happen. That's the first part of the verse. The second part is, but that gathered by hand will increase, meaning when you set your sights lower in terms of what you want to accomplish, then you will probably be very happy, because what you were hoping for, you will get, because it wasn't beyond human ability. And in the process, you will feel very, very blessed that what you wanted is what you got. Okay, so we have to be reasonable in terms of what we ask God to give us. Okay, let's go a little bit further and take a look at this. Number 14. The teaching of the wise man is a source of life, to turn him away from the snares of death. Now, this verse is telling us, when you want wisdom, when you want to know where you should go, what you should do, go to somebody who has wisdom. Go to somebody who's known for their intelligence, and they can really put you in the right direction. Because if you don't go to the right source for your inspiration, you could really end up in a terrible place, because you really went too far away from what was achievable. And of course the point is, the wise know what works, and the foolish don't know what works. And if you follow the foolish, you're going to really be very disappointed. I know when I've done counseling before I came here, I realized sometimes people would say to me that their life is such a miserable place, they have nothing more to lose, so they're going to make a dangerous leap to solve their life's problems. And their mistake is, it couldn't get any worse. So what have I got to lose by doing such and such a thing? And I would try and tell them, you're making a mistake. If you think life cannot get worse, it certainly can. And by doing something really, really strange, something that's very far out, you can regret more than ever what you're doing. And perhaps a good example would be to take all the money you have and bet on a horse, and find out that you didn't win. And so where are you? Next thing, you're living in the street. What a terrible way to go through life, living in the street. But this is what people do. Okay. Going to the next verse, number 16. Every clever person acts with knowledge, but the fool broadcasts his foolishness. Well, a clever person, a wise person, uses knowledge to move forward. But when a person is a fool, meaning they don't think that anyone can give them advice, they think they're very, very smart. Whatever they say and do really, shows how really foolish they are. They really are not moving in the right direction. So, of course, one of the teachings of our religion is that never try to make any major decision without consulting with somebody that you respect, somebody who may have wisdom. We even have this idea mentioned when God is creating the human beings, right? At the beginning of Genesis, the story of creation. We have a very interesting verse where God says something that sounds very strange. It says, "Let us make human beings in our image." And the commentators say, "Us? Who would us be?" And they explain that when God is about to create human beings, God is consulting with the angels for their input. Now, you may have to ask, does God really need advice from the angels? God is way, way wiser than the angels. But the point is, whenever you make a major step in life, consult the people around you, get some ideas, but never, never just decide on your own that this is what must be done without consultation. That's a very dangerous thing to do, and it can lead to terrible grief. And finally, I'm going to finish up with number 18, where it says, "Poverty and shame will befall one who rejects discipline." And that means that our religion teaches us that we have to have certain rules of conduct. Okay, if you want to make a living, you have to get up at a certain time, and if you want to go to synagogue, you also there are rules for when you would pray and when you don't pray.
Right.
And so the point becomes that you do need a certain amount of discipline in your life to achieve greatness. And if you don't, if you reject the discipline, what you will find is poverty and shame and embarrassment and humiliation. However, he who heeds rebuke will be honored. That means when somebody that you respect tells you stop what you're doing, you're going in the wrong direction, that person will be very fortunate because they went to the right party, and they, even if they're being insulted by that intelligent person, in the end that advice will really be honored, and the person will be honored because even though they didn't want to hear that, they did not want to hear what they were doing wrong. In the end, that will change their lives for the better. And of course, the end of Genesis is all about where Father Jacob says to his 12 sons, he gathers them together before his death, and he lets every one of them have it. He tells them how he was disappointed with each one, what they didn't do this right or that right. And in the end, he actually turned them around. He managed to get them to improve and to become better people. And as a result of that discipline that they imposed on themselves, they were able to survive the hundreds of years of enslavement in Egypt. Well, that's all I have to say for today. But I hope you'll join me next week. And I want to say hello to